We are on day 2 of our online design festival, and this is the 3rd session of today with Laura Sanderson and Matt Lamont, who are both involved in setting up and managing and running studios, and involved in very in alternative creative projects and in different initiatives. And today's session, we really wanted to sort of look at the reality of what that is from the inside. So I think it's easy to see it from the outside, and we look at the great work and studios growing and teams growing and all those sorts of things, and we sort of don't always get the real picture. I think it's just nice to maybe look a bit deeper than skin level and sort of see what's the challenges these guys face. So if it's okay with you, Laura, can I just ask you to let us know a little bit more about you, the work that you do, and the companies that you're involved in, or the studios you're involved in?
Yeah, so I've been a designer for 10 years, which is really scary. 3 years ago, I got invited to join Dog Eat Cog, which is a design agency in York, specialising in animation, illustration, branding, and sort of blended approach of delivering all that as one. Set up by Rich 10 years ago. He invited Mark to join about 5 years ago, and then they both invited me into the business as co-owner, like 3 years ago. So that's sort of primarily the main job. And then 2019, I started Art Is My Career, which is a community interest company, which is a whole minefield in its own. But the idea of filling the gap that the government keeps leaving by cutting arts education in schools and trying to give teachers and students the resources and the knowledge to be able to understand what the creative industry is and see the opportunities within it.
Amazing. Matt, can you just do the same for me, please?
Yeah, so I sort of co-run Outplace Studio here in Bradford. We're a 5-person team, and that's sort of my primary role. And I also run a sort of a design blog and archive called Design Reviewed, and do sort of visiting lecturers about design history and sort of other activities related to design education outside of that. But yeah, my main role is creative director at Outplace. We set up in a similar time, the March of the pandemic, when that first happened. So perfect timing to set up a studio there.
But professional suicide. I think you're also very responsible for a very big archive of materials, aren't you?
Yeah, there's about 4,000 items in the floor above me. So I've been collecting for probably about 12 years now. So any spare surplus I get personally, or just things I see, I just collect and share all them. And sort of, I've probably spent the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, sort of archiving everything I've collected, and kind of creating a big database of design history as well.
And that now must form part of the education as well, isn't it? Because I know do you bring students or groups, classes in to sort of learn from that or explore it?
Yeah, so I do things where we bring students into the co-working space and we do design history lectures. But then I also sort of mainly do the teaching online now. So everything, the presentations, is to hand during my talk. So I teach for Barcelona School of Design and Leeds Beckett, and visit a lecture for University of Bournemouth as well.
Brilliant, amazing. Laura, starting with you, because you were invited into the agency by the other guys, how does that work from a structure perspective, from a challenging what goes on? Is it an equal playing field? How does that sort of, is there a hierarchy in that, or is it just everybody's equal?
So everyone's equal. So Rich, who founded the business, was very much always on the sort of the idea that he wanted everyone to be equal. We all get paid the same. We all own the business. Everyone's voice is equal. It was something he was really passionate about, and something I think we would always keep within. So there's no hierarchy. Everyone has their own say and everything, but we all sort of specialize in different bits. So it sort of happens that we just naturally all manage. Mark is the animator, he naturally manages that. Rich is a really talented designer and illustrator, so he sort of naturally manages those sorts of projects. Then more sort of like branding focus for myself.
That must be really interesting dynamic, because you obviously not necessarily just your skills, but from the perspective of being female in design, with two guys that must also allow you to sort of see things and address things and move into areas and be quite dynamic in decision making.
Yeah. I think the first sort of 2 years of joining the company, I was a bit like, so I own this,
Okay.
like, are you sure? Like, it just felt so alien and something that I'd never ever imagined a point I'd get to in my career. But it is still interesting because you still get some clients that would only sort of or prefer to speak to the guys. Yeah,
Must be infuriating.
yeah, it is.
And
But it's fine.
but how did that come about, if you don't mind me asking? Was that a long-standing relationship? You knew those, you were friends beforehand, or worked in the same circles?
So the agency, before I joined it, co-founded York Design Week
Okay.
with United by Design and Kaizen Arts Agency. So a week-long festival in York celebrating design. And I joined the volunteer team in 2019, I think, 18 maybe. Joined the volunteer team just to sort of help put on events. The idea of that as my career was sort of somewhere in the back of my mind. So something sort of around education for kids. And then I met Rich through that. And then I was working at an agency which didn't have the best culture. I wasn't enjoying it. And that negative culture had a real impact on my design work. And I could sort of feel my passion for the industry really deteriorating over time. So I just had a really honest conversation with Rich and just sort of said, if you've got any jobs going, expecting to be sort of hired as a designer. Went for this meeting with them both, and it was like, yeah, join the business as a director. This is how much you'll earn. This is how we run it. This is what you'll earn. It just really naturally and really surreally happened.
Mm. Yeah, the idea of doing a 5-day design festival, that's a stupid idea, isn't it?
Who would do that?
Crazy process. That's quite progressive though in that nature, because I've been involved in situations where I've tried to instigate people either A, joining me, or me potentially sort of helping them. They might not be able to employ you, but might be able to look at some sort of structural change that allows that to happen. And I've always found that quite a difficult thing, because people are quite guarded about what they own or what they've started, and sometimes that limits their thinking. So that's from his perspective. That must have been really refreshing for you.
Yeah, I think that's where a community is just a massive thing, part of what we do, whether that is the businesses we work with, putting on stuff like York Design Week. So it was just like a natural progression for it to happen within the business as well. And we all got sort of a sense of how each other works through running the design festival together. That then sort of, if that was almost a testing ground without us really knowing it.
Yeah, it's a nice way of thinking about it, actually. So you could, that you work on things collectively or collaboratively, and as a way of understanding if it'll work. And from an outsider's perspective, it seems like there's quite a lot going on in New York from a community perspective. It seems, and we've had a lot of people on from the area that all seem to be very much pushing in the same direction. So that must also be nice to have that external community. We don't need to be in each other's pockets, but that there's people within the area to lean on.
Yeah, and there's so much. I mean, in York, we keep talking about the idea of doing this big map and joining all the dots. Because as soon as you speak to somebody, they know somebody else, and there's all these connections. And there's just, a ton of stuff going on, and a ton of like-minded people who you'd think we would all know each other by now, and more people keep coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, it takes time, and they're really are legacy sort of type projects, aren't they? Where somebody's got to take the ball by the horns, so to speak, and sort of lead the way, and then hopefully others follow, and it's that Bible effect. Matt, when you mentioned about your co-founder of Out of Place and launching just as the pandemic was really about to start, and we didn't know that at the time, what was those early days like? And you still are in your infancy in the grand scheme of things. What were those immediate early days look like, from discussing it with your friend about how this is going to work, the structure, how you're going to fund this, when do you leave employment if you were in employment previously, and then basically the world falling apart in front of you as you only just started taking your first steps?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough that Haig, who I co-founded Out of Place with, we collaborated quite a lot. We both had businesses before. We both set up businesses quite young, so we made a lot of mistakes. We wish we'd have done stuff differently. And then we got to a point where we was invoicing each other every month, and we both needed a member of staff. So it was kind of bubbling for a while, and then we just said, you know what, we might as well set something up together. So originally we was going to specialise in, because what we did before was publications, and we were going to specialise in place marketing and publications. And then when we sort of set everything up, the pandemic happened, and then instantly we turned more or less into a digital agency. So I sort of learned more and more development work, and I had to switch my skill set instantly. So it was a big shift in what I originally kind of had planned. But with that, we sort of grew to, and we got an extra member of staff after 6 months, another member of staff after a year, and then we've now got a sort of 5th team member. And then almost like, because my role was mainly sort of purely design when we set up, and the co-director, his role was kind of project management, bringing in the work, doing all the admin, sort of all the work that's not design. And it soon got to a point where I was getting a bit burnt out, and I've kind of grown, and kind of almost like my job now is a lot easier because it's my skill sets are kind of deployed amongst people. But it's been a good learning curve, and we've learned a lot from the people we've hired. So we've hired no juniors, which is not something we planned on doing, but we've kind of grown due to sort of demand. So we've needed people of sort of high caliber skill sets to just quickly take things sort of off my hands and other people's hands. So we've kind of grown and hired people sort of more senior than ourselves. So we've learned a lot from the people we've hired, and everyone who we've been involved with the agency. We all feel part of this team now because we kind of developed it all together as well. So we've got really nice sort of friendly team dynamic, and yeah, we're always just giving each other feedback, and we got like an open door policy. So if people want to come in for a day, they can. We've got lots of space here, or if they want to work from home because we set up in a pandemic, people can do that as well. So we've got a really good company culture. We're not strict with sort of work hours or anything like that. So everyone tells me they love working here.
In front of you.
Yeah. Don't know what's going on Google Chat behind the scenes.
Do you think these early phases with your partner that helped iron out anything? So in theory, you launched your studio after having quite a long period of sort of testing other things, haven't you, and getting to building it up and strengthening that sort of side of things. I think that was really important in what seems like getting up to a 5 team, offices and all the rest of it in that short period of time, especially over a pandemic, seems like an incredible achievement. I don't think it would be possible without all the learnings and failings and all the other stuff beforehand.
No, yeah, I think it's you learn. Everyone works differently, and sometimes it takes a while to kind of learn how people work, and that's like a completely different sort of skill set to doing the job. It's the way people work. So me and Egg, because we've known each other a few years, and I think we worked together about 4 years previously, both doing separate things. We kind of understand each other's way of working and what we were good at and what we wasn't good at. So it means when we set up, we kind of, without putting pen to paper, we had defined roles automatically without kind of saying this is what you do, this is what I do. So it worked out quite well in that way.
Yeah, I think maximising your abilities and understanding that you're not best skilled in other areas is really important in that sort of early phase, isn't it?
Yep.
So moving on to more, I'll go back to you, Laura. Now we've sort of painted a picture more about where you're at and the structures and businesses that you are behind. On the more of the day-to-day, Laura, how do you guys go about, say, winning clients for anybody that's tuning in that would be interested in jumping from employment into starting a studio or going freelance into business ownership? Is there a process and a way that you do that? Is it word of mouth, or do you is there somebody within the company out of you three that is responsible for those tasks?
Mostly, I probably say 99% is word of mouth, and that's sort of where those community projects come in. So obviously we don't get paid to do York Design Week. There's a load of other, we don't get paid to do Art as My Career. We're involved in various other businesses, other community organisations that we give our time and skill back to, which then just naturally builds a network of people. It might take 6 months, a year, even longer for that to come back with a new connection, some work, but it's just naturally grown through the network of people. We tend not to do pitches. Our success rate isn't great, which probably might say more about us than the pitch process. But most of these pitch processes, 60% of the grade is based on your quote. So if you're not the lowest quote instantly, you sort of, what's the saying? You're fighting a losing battle. So if you don't go in low on the cost, so we just found it's not really worth our time doing the pitch process. And for us, it just naturally comes through word of mouth, which we're really grateful for. But then the time's gone into that, 5, 6 years running Your Design Week, all the previous stuff before, I think between us, there's like 40 years design experience. So all those years have led up to this. We all spent years and years in studios beforehand. And then, those relationships you make, those clients then follow you. So there's been some clients from agencies I've worked at previously who have now come to us, just all building that network.
And do you find that a lot of that work, especially word of mouth, comes from within the region that you're based within, Yorkshire, or is that
No,
itself all over?
all over. So some of our biggest clients are sort of global, but sort of Cambridge, London way. And that is sometimes that, somebody has a connection to somebody in York. But it probably also does stem back somehow. But like some of our work, it's been somebody who's at the local pub who does work for somebody, and then it just goes down the grapevine. And that's sort of how it comes about, rather than necessarily going out and sort of marketing. We talked about quite a bit whether we should sort of bring on a business development person. But then there's conversations, how do you integrate somebody else into the team? How do we work on that? We don't work standard hours. We all work very different. I'm very much the early bird. I like to be up sort of 6 a.m. Whereas, the guys, Rich has got a kid in school, so that doesn't work for him. They might work later nights. Mark's partner works weekends, so he works weekends. So it's how do you bring somebody in to do that, to work around all our schedules? We've never sort of figured out a way of how that would work. And thankfully, never at this point, touch wood, never needed to.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it, when you've got, especially in a post-COVID working schedule where people are very flexible and working from home or working, different times at different places. When it's an ownership model doing that, it's different to an employee doing that, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
You've got to be very cautious of that. But yeah, no, I think the word of mouth, and again, the networking, we were talking about this a lot yesterday in a few of the talks, how important that is, but it's associated with more corporate worlds, and it's a bit of a negative connotation with, not particularly pleasant, but in the creative field, I think it's ever so important to build that up. And it doesn't have to be overly formal; it can be sociable. With the initiatives that you do, I wouldn't mind coming on to Art of My Career a little bit later, but for the festival, you found that must not only be professionally helping from a development, but personally as well, because I think a lot of people don't always understand why they should dedicate time, free their time to do these sort of things. They just sort of see it as a waste of time because they're not getting paid. But it offers so much more, doesn't it, than just being something nice to do or being a paid for role. There's a lot of professional development benefits to it.
Yeah, there's some people I've met through Your Design Week that I probably would have never met, and topics that, because Your Design Week talks on how we can sort of design systems to work better. So there's stuff around housing, around food poverty. There's conversations and projects there that I would have never A, known about, or B, felt probably comfortable to get involved in. But the fact that they're part of this team, and that then sort of changes your perception on how you're designing. Because, when you get a new client, you have to put yourselves in their foot. So just expanding our knowledge as designers is only ever going to benefit us. but then it's also things of, there's a team of 20 plus of us trying to manage everyone's needs and well-being through that. There's a lot you learn from that.
But having the commonality between you, because you're all from within, maybe live, you might not have been born in that area, but you spend a lot of your time there. Having that common link, it's a pride in the region, isn't it? It's a pride in the city itself, and wanting everybody to succeed. It's a real, a real commendable thing to be doing. Matt, it's going back to a similar question with Laura, from a finding a client's perspective. Did you have those roles? You sort of said that you and your co-founder had sort of fell into the roles that you took up, just because through an understanding of each other and what your skills were. When it came to finding clients and started to build the business and generate income, how did that work for you guys?
So we brought some of our existing clients over that we'd worked with numerous years. Because we're based in a co-working space as well, we've got quite a few clients through conversation and people renting offices and things like that. But we do get quite a lot of work via tenders. So we're not the best people at promoting ourselves. Yeah, me and sort of Peg, the co-director, just come in there. We both got kids as well, so we struggle sort of going to networking events and things like that. But hopefully I'll have a bit more time for that soon. So we've sort of been improving our tender document on almost like every time we do a tender, we open it and rewrite it, and then all our staff members contribute and write on the tenders as well. So we get everyone's expertise in there. But that's opened up avenues. So through that, we've sort of worked with clients in sort of Ireland and Scotland, and it's sort of through that process we kind of connect with people who we kind of didn't have no relationship or no gateway with. So it's worked quite well from that point of view.
And how do you go about, from anybody again like watching that, maybe looking to step into ownership world or start a small studio? How do you go about finding tenders and understanding the documents? Because they can be quite complex. Well, my experience is they're bloody long-winded and very difficult to interpret a lot of the time.
Yeah, so I kind of weirdly like the challenge of kind of create, almost like reading a tender and then kind of creating a brief based on everything they've asked on how it will be delivered. So there's various platforms online. We look at things like that. And we kind of rule out what's not appropriate for us and maybe what's too small, and then we just hone down on a few tenders, kind of what we're best suited for. Often when we are putting them together, we have to learn new skills or new platforms. So there's quite a lot of time that goes into that. But it's almost like everyone we've kind of pitched for, we kind of learn some skills for the next one, or if we don't win a tender, we get feedback on the next one. So, I mean, some of our tender documents now are 120 pages long, fully designed and written. We kind of really like that process. I like it, but a lot of designers don't, because it's seen as less creative.
Yeah, but they tend to be for more sort of quite corporate-y, they can be council, government-y type projects, can't they? So they need to be, you need to have an understanding of a lot of different, things, boxes that need ticks, and don't you? And writing them in a certain way so that they can become successful, for the people that they're written for.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff we run's arts and culture based, because they're over a certain value, and sort of have to go through tender. But yeah, we've had to get certain accreditations, and yeah, we've had to do quite a lot of extra work. And
if that's part of your plan, part of your plan and your long-term ambition to grow the business, it's well worth investing in it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I've had to learn how to set up servers and set up green policies and all sorts over the last 3 years. It's definitely been a learning curve, but yeah, I've enjoyed every minute. I'm one of them people who likes to do. I'd rather do 20 things than one thing. So it keeps me busy.
You mentioned just at the start of that about ones that aren't right for you compared to the ones that are right. Is that something you've had to learn from a business perspective, in saying no to a lot of experiences and a lot of opportunities because they're not going to be right for you as people or as a business?
Yeah, because we're a team of five, we've got to be realistic and manage his expectations and what we can deliver and what we can't deliver. So we don't expect anyone who works with us or for us to sort of be working after 5 o'clock. So if someone needs sort of around the clock, we won't want a team member getting a phone call at 1 a.m. to say this needs doing. So we just have to be realistic, really.
Yeah, after
Make
that.
sure that the work we get is quite fun and engaging as well, and not just like months of dry slog.
Yeah, I've done it myself. Just said yes too many times just to try and impress people, and always ended up in pretty much in a hospital bed or lying flat on a sofa for weeks and then burnt out to smithereens. It's not a good choice to do. You mentioned you're based in a co-working space. Has that helped you start to shape the business, because it's a creative space, there'll be like-minded people around, it becomes a bit of a hub maybe for the city or the where you're based, and you sort of you can then start to network subconsciously that way, can't you, by having people around you all the time?
Yeah, definitely. And we've because people come and go as well. You'll have people in the co-work space for a few months in between jobs or projects. So you kind of just get to have conversations about stuff, or if there's something I'm stuck on, there might be someone co-working or in an office that day who can kind of just give me a little thumbs up or tell me I'm doing something wrong. So it works well that way. And it's also because I've got the space for the archive and there's an event space here as well. So we can kind of use that to sort of host his own events. We've had universities in here, we've had client meetings in here, events in here. We had a typography night, which I presented some of the archiving. So it's kind of just like creating a bubbling scene for activity, really.
So it's very similar to Laura then in that respect, quite ingrained in the community, tirelessly doing things that you don't get necessarily recognition for, you don't get paid for. It's just about being continually part of that conversation, which in itself just sort of it spreads, doesn't it? That can help generate from a word of mouth perspective of business, can't it? You can help, just by being within those circles, universities, education, clients get wind of that, or other organisations. That must be really helpful for, just building momentum and getting the name out there.
Yeah, also like keeps everything a bit fresh as well. Just sort of doing, like Laura says, like doing things sort of pro bono and doing things kind of related to what you do, but not like the more indirectly related. So it's not like the events and things like that. So it's like another skill set as well. It's kind of I feel like when I do design history lectures, it's kind of a break from work whilst kind of developing almost like a personal brand and indirectly getting work from that as well.
Yeah, I don't think about it like that. Laura, going on to the art as my career, I think there must be a lot of people out there that are interested in doing things that are socially good, that are, especially in creative industries, have the opportunity to use our skills to help improve other people's lives and sort of change the direction and also fill, like say, plug gaps that are being left by people that should be more responsible than just to rip funding out of this, that, and the other. From a physical and a mental perspective, what's that look like from the inside? If you've got ownership of a studio, you've got obviously your own bills and lifestyle to cover. What does that look like in terms of actually taking the steps to make that a reality?
It's stress. A lot of stress. But it's worth it. It is worth it. Art is my career started as just like a 2-day event as part of your design week. And then we had such great feedback from schools, from students, from local councils and organisations that it sort of naturally formed into something. But then obviously came the legal stuff of you have to actually be registered as something. We can't just do this great thing. There needs to be a bank account, there needs to be directors, there needs to be articles of whatever they are. Should know this, but so then we just went through the whole process of what do we set up as. So that's when the sort of community interest company comes in versus a limited company versus a charity. But yeah, probably to answer your question, there's a lot of stress and juggling time. And juggling time versus income is the constant battle. because that is my career isn't financially sustainable at the moment. It doesn't have a solid income coming in. We sort of have a couple of funding bids. We got our Hearts Council funding bid, but that doesn't cover sort of day-to-day running. So trying to do that alongside running a business, trying to also pay the bills, keep animals alive, remembering to eat. Yeah, it's a lot of just trying to juggle time. As much as when we registered out as my career as a CIC, I said, right, I'll do Monday to Thursday, dog eat cog, the agency side. And I'll do like Friday, Saturday, Sunday out as my career. I was like, right, well, when do I go to the pub? And when do I see my friends? And when do I, and yeah, I'm so, I'd be lying if I said I have that worked out because I don't. But hopefully at some point it might ease and become a bit easier.
I always find that understanding how people find the energy and the motivation to do these things is always quite inspiring. Because as someone that goes from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs pretty much on a half-day basis, it's that regular where you just sort of like, this is the greatest thing in the world, so I might as well just go and live in the desert somewhere. How do you, when you're doing something like this where it's so driven by helping others, how do you find that motivation and the energy to keep on going?
I mean, it is tough. I mean, Sunday I sat down, I was like, what am I doing? Let's just close out as my career. It's not worth it. Then a couple of hours later, you sort of realize what you've achieved. I think definitely the strategy, we wrote the Arts My Career strategy in 2020. So we re-looked at that a couple of months ago, sat down, looked at what had been achieved. I keep saying we, I don't know who this royal we is. Although Arts My Career does have an advisory board who are incredible. But I sat down and looked at everything that has been achieved to date. When you look at like there's 60 plus schools that are using the resources, like 30,000 students have been engaged by them. When you look at all the stats of what has been achieved, that's the motivation because it's clearly needed. Teachers clearly need the help and support. And I just, the idea of, so I went to uni first time, did criminology and psychology. Didn't realize that creative career was an option, wasted a shitload of money. And the idea of somebody going through that and have like owe it, I think I owe like 41 grand in student loan. Like, Jesus, like for what? The idea of someone going through that just because they weren't told they could turn their creativity into a job to earn money infuriates me, and that that anger then turns to motivation somewhere in the process.
That's a nice way of looking at it. I think it's quite disturbing how many things like what you do exist because of those experiences and how they continue to repeat themselves. It's another deeper story, isn't it, about the education side of design and creative arts and that sort of stuff. It's not great. But I think it's really important, and you just touched upon it then from talking about what you've achieved so far and the strategy of the project. Is that something, I remember once looking at structures for a project I was involved in, and we didn't want it to be limited, a bit like what you're saying. We were, well, I was bamboozled, I say the we as well. Well, I was bamboozled by just a lot of text about different structures and not really given any advice about what was actually worthwhile. In the end, we didn't do any of them, but it seemed to be CIC or charity was like one extreme to the other. There was a lot of other things in between. Do you think it's really important if anybody is looking to take that leap to do something more for social good? Because you can still earn a wage from that, can't you? If you can make it work and sustainable, it's not just a soulless task of giving all money away for free. There's still a potential to make it a living. Do you think it's really important to actually have much more of a look at this from a business strategic perspective? So you have got goals and visions and purpose and all those sort of things, as opposed to maybe just taking the leap of something fun to do. It sometimes doesn't end up really shaping how it should do.
Yeah, because I think so. I set up as my career as a CIC, and there's various ways a CIC can be set up. And I literally went through the form. I was like, that sounds about right. And then since I've sat down with the accountant and sort of talked about how I want people to be paid from it, how we want the structure of the CIC to be, and it turns out I've set it up wrong. But you can't go back and change that. So it's either we sort of close the CIC and all the work that's been done into it so far, the bank account, the Arts Council bid that is linked to the bank account, all the funding bids that are out there linked to the bank account, and starting again, or I change my plan of how I want people to be involved and how they can be paid from it, how directors come in and come out of different projects. So whereas if I'd sat down and actually looked at that in more detail, I probably could have avoided a lot of that. But at the time, we had some funding that was available to us and we weren't set up for something. So it was like a mad dash to get registered, to get a bank account, to get this funding, which is often how these things work. But yeah, had I taken the time to sit down and properly plan that out, things probably would have been a bit easier. But these things naturally snowball. Like I didn't anticipate in 2019 when we did the first event that Arts Macri was going to be SCIC and I was going to have this whole other company to run. Like it was just going to be a 2-day event. We were going to inspire some young people. We were going to showcase some careers. And suddenly I've blinked and now I've got this business to run.
Yeah, and I suppose however much I make it sound a little bit more, we need to have a logical approach to this. Majority of these things do just happen. They evolve very quickly, don't they, and go in all sorts of directions. And I think however sort of stressful they can be and frustrating, that's sort of part of the beauty of it, isn't it? Is that you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. This isn't really a corporate business where you've got to have step 1 to 1,000 put in place in advance and you then generate income and revenues and funding, etc. It's just part of the course of a thing like that, isn't it? It's designed to, you're solving a problem and that problem's ever evolving, so you need to evolve with it.
The nice thing I think about a community interest company is you have to define who your community is, and you have to report back every year to how you've delivered for that community. Because you exist to make that community better. There's something really refreshing about that we're not just here to run as a business. That already is our goal. We have our community that we want to create these products for and better and work for that community.
Yeah, no, that's commendable to say the least. Matt, moving on to much more, some of the more basic things like challenges. What are the things, or if there have been any things that you've had to overcome that were like some of the biggest hurdles, and that maybe could help advise other people to avoid?
I guess capacity from personal perspective, because obviously you've got to keep bringing the work in, but if stuff gets dragged on or if clients change, staff members, or numerous other elements that come into play, it's managing an unforeseen sort of workload from like outside perspectives. That's definitely been a challenge, and making sure there's sort of cover there, and that knowing when to take annual leave as well.
Do you put that? Have you started to put those into processes that you now are part of, like an onboarding process, or for staff and a cultural sort of, that they're not things that may be publicly available, but internally these are the structures that we work to?
Yeah, so we've kind of hired based on capacity now. So we've grown our team based on, almost the needs of the client. We've got someone also on like a freelance basis who's in charge of like HR and wellbeing as well. So we've got someone there who's always sort of at the end of a phone for support, things like that as well.
Do you have, I presume you do have, I presume everybody has the worries of, as you grow, you've got to support that growth, you've got to maintain that. You don't want to just have a client or maybe a retainer for a certain amount of time and then that allows you to hire, but then you're concerned that within 6 months that might just be taken away. Do you have to continually build foundations to keep it stable?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work we do we sort of web development as well. We'll get people on retainers, so we've got an ongoing relationship there. We check in with everyone as well, but we're always sort of looking for new work. So I never approach it like, right, we're working with this client now, we've got X amount of money for 5 years. It's right. If we work, I kind of see things as a project by project basis. We're continually looking for new work. So I don't know. I'm never worried about running out of work. I'm kind of just more worried about running out of steam.
Yeah. And do you find that if going through like the tender approach, that sometimes guarantees, when you win them, guarantees quite a large portion of work, isn't it? As opposed to maybe getting one client that just needs one job, and it can be short-lived and not very, not always the best use of time. Is that where you sort of find where you're moving towards as a that's a good sort of setup to have?
It varies really, because a lot of the tender stuff we'll do it'd be because you're tendering for a specific job at a set price. So might be an arts organisation, so they got €22,000 to develop a website, but that's their maximum budget. So once that's gone, that's almost like that's working with that client for 3 or 4 years complete until that comes round again. So we always, as much as we get the tenders, we're always doing sort of local work, and we got kind of a policy where it sounds a bit cheesy, but it's like we do good work for good people. So if someone's doing something interesting locally, we'll take on that as well. There's always stuff around, but I feel, I don't know, I'm kind of empowered by the work that we deliver here as well. So there's always a momentum to do more of it.
Yeah, that's a nice way to look at it. If you can be inspired by what's going on around you, that's
yeah, and the team we've got as well, like seeing what the team delivers, that inspires me as well, keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, what you mentioned earlier about having staff that are potentially higher or more skilled than you are, or however you worded it. That again, I think that's a great place to be for an owner, because it's not just sort of thinking that the know-it-all is and everything goes by what you say. Having a team and giving them the power to sort of control work, contribute to everything as from within. That's really nice, because I know when I started out, that just doesn't exist. You were a number and you just churned stuff out, and you were just told where to be and what to do. And it's that's when disconnect happens and people start to sort of feel uncomfortable in where they work. And Laura mentioned earlier about toxic culture. So that's so easy for that to breed, as opposed to positive ones. You have to really put the time and energy into making positive ones. Laura, just quickly before we finish, apparently that's 45 minutes already. Similar question really about the challenges that you guys face as a 3-man team. Have you got any other staff at all? Is it just the founders or owners?
Just the 3 of us. We sort of take on freelancers, project dependent, depending on sort of what skills we need. And then there's different businesses in York we collaborate with. So there's an agency who we don't do development in-house. So there's an agency, Cursive, if we do development, who we collaborate with quite a bit. But in terms of sort of how we manage sort of workload, and was that the question? I completely forgot.
Yeah, really, well, the challenge really is the day-to-day, of finding clients, generating enough work. It's all of those sort of things that can become a little bit blasé and we don't talk about much as a wider industry. But they're always at the forefront of what we have to meet, aren't they? It's just always interesting to see how other people approach it and their way of dealing with that.
So we were quite lucky in respect of, as the pandemic came, although we had an initial dip as everyone sort of paused, then we got fairly busy. So we sort of said as a team, we sat down, while we've got this busy period, let's build up a buffer in the bank. So if we do hit that dip again, obviously not knowing what's going on in the pandemic, while we've got this work in, let's keep this buffer in the bank that covers us for 6 months plus, so that if, touch wood, anything did happen, we've got that safety net. And I think since we've done that, I personally, I think the guys would agree, we haven't worried half as much as we probably would have done before, because that buffer's there. As much as we don't have to use it, that's that cushion, and taking that stress away then gives you headspace to actually work on projects, which then starts that whole thing of the ongoing networking. Once you deliver that, you have a case study, word of mouth starts.
Yeah, because it can be quite boring, can't it, finance, when you're creative. But the whole idea of you don't know when something's going to blow up like a machine. Macs aren't cheap to replace, are they? Or when the taxman comes knocking, it's not the most pleasant of seeing the brown envelopes come through the door. It's not everybody's cup of tea, is it? So having that.
Chasing invoices. I think we've got an invoice that's, I think it's like 500 days overdue. and just chasing and chasing and chasing, and it's just, yeah, they're the sorts of things that we sort of pre-plan for by having that buffer.
Yeah.
But then just speaking of Max, like you just said, like equipment, our local council did like a 50% match funding for new equipment, and it was sort of out for a year. So while I was out, we sort of said, right, we might not need these machines for another year, but if we do them now, do it early, we're going to save 50%. So we sort of tried to take advantage of all those little bits of help that come from various councils and organisations around us.
Yeah, well, that's very rare, isn't it? I wish my council was as generous as that. They normally put 50% on top. Yeah, no, that's taken us up to the allotted time. Sorry, I have to cut it so short. It feels like it's just a click of the fingers and it's gone. But with another one coming up very soon, I've got a bit of a tight schedule. But I really appreciate your time, both of you. It's always appreciated to hear the thoughts and opinions and experiences of other people that are in the same boat. And hopefully everybody that was tuning in appreciated this. If anybody wants to watch a recording, we are filming this so that we can send it out so you can watch it again at your own leisure. And we will also make it available in a few weeks online so people can watch it open source. But until then, we'll have to catch up again soon. But until then, have a great rest of day and week, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care. See you soon. Ta-da.
Bye.